I got it. Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for agreeing to be here for this presentation. As I mentioned before, this is part of is a presentation that I put together on behalf of the Business Analyst Body of Knowledge study group for the Certified Business Analyst certification exam coming up in April. And this particular topic is actually quite useful and valuable to anyone who is in require it's all about gathering requirements and managing them for whatever project you're working on, whatever task, whatever elicitation process you have. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what is the purpose of requirements lifecycle management, which is all about ensuring that your requirements and designs are aligned to your business objectives and solutions scope, as well as enabling the tracking of those requirements throughout the life cycle of your projects. So the way that our LCM is described, it's basically how we manage and maintain meaningful relationships between requirements and designs, from inception to requirement, to ensure that all business information is available for reuse. So we begin by assessing the requirements, determining whether or not we have approval and consensus. If yes, we trace them, we maintain them, we prioritize them, and then go back to the cycle by reassessing them again. So the tasks are tracing, maintaining, prioritizing, assessing the changes, and then finally getting approval on those requirements. So one mnemonic device that we like to use is to think in terms of Tom and Mary can't approve. So in this case, it it's a memory tool to help us memorize that cycle. Now, another one that we like to use is in terms of the business analyst core concept model is to think in terms of vision of success. Every single chapter gets framed with this framework where we have value, stakeholder, need, solution, context, and change. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this because it gets a little complicated, but I'm going to walk you through the main tasks. So right now we are talking about the requirements maintenance, the tasks involved. We have inputs and then we have outputs. So first we have assess, which we talked about briefly. Then we have trace, where we analyze and maintain the relationship between those requirements. We maintain them, ensuring that they're accurate and current throughout the life cycle. We prioritize them based on value, urgency, and risk associated with those requirements. And finally, we work with stakeholders to ensure that we have approval and agreement for the requirements and designs. Now, to summarize it, we have requirements, designs, proposed changes, and then verified requirements. Then we have outputs, which are what we were just referring to. Trace requirements, maintain requirements, prioritize requirements, assessing the changes, and finally getting approval. This, uh, this framework is actually quite important when you're thinking about taking the business analyst certification exam because becoming familiar with the order of these steps is actually critical when you're taking the exam because they'll try to trick you, and it's quite a challenge in that regard. So let's just talk about trace requirements. Trace requirements are again about ensuring that our requirements are aligned to the business objectives. In other words, as you can see here, gathering business requirements does not always deliver the results we expect. So purpose, again, ensuring that we have aligned, that the requirements are aligned with one another. We have um, a definition of what traceability is, which is ensuring that the solution conforms to the requirements. It enables faster impact analysis, helps us identify inconsistencies, gives us deeper insights into the scope and complexity of any change in our to our requirements and enables reliable assessment. So you can think of it in terms of some examples of visual representations involving traceability, whether it's value chain process, sub-process activity task, or design code and test. Question before we continue, has anybody seen anything like this at work? You should all be raising your hands. Yeah. So one trap that they like to use in the exam is traceability is not documentation for its own sake. It exists to show alignment and value. Here's you have, again, just a reminder of the workflow. So you have the inputs, you have guidelines and tools, then you have techniques such as business analysis, business rules analysis, functional decomposition, scope modeling, and process modeling. And then finally, you have outputs. You have the traced requirements and designs. And then you have a series of stakeholders. These are the people that are often involved at this stage, from sponsor, supplier, and tester to customer, SMEs, operational support, and project managers, along with end users. Notice, however, that the business analyst is not listed here because we're always there. So, of course, we don't need to uh, promote ourselves in that regard. So, the next stage is maintaining the requirements, right? So, again, this is about ensuring that we retain accuracy and consistency throughout the life cycle. I did a quick search for my loss requirements documents and Google found them right away. But how do I get rid of the ads now? I'm glad somebody's laughing. That's good. So maintaining requirements, I'm just going to go through these fairly quick. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But the idea is, again, uh, representing the ongoing need, ensuring that it's maintained and valid over time. It's all about consistency. So you have maintaining the requirements, the attributes, and then reusing them, with the trap being that maintenance does not equal change approval. It's totally different. Guidelines and tools are usually around the information management approach that you use. Here are some of the techniques that are used. Some additional techniques include user stories, data modeling, data flow diagrams, functional decomposition again. And then finally, you have your outputs, which are the maintained requirements and designs. You'll see that when you're talking about requirements, maintaining requirements, you're talking to your SMEs, operational support, your testers, and often regulators. Prioritizing requirements, on the other hand, is determining the order and the priority of the requirements to maximize delivered value. We list all the features, score each feature, throw away everything, and then build what upper management tells you. Good, excellent. So purpose again is to rank your requirements in order of relative importance, and interdependencies between those requirements are identified and may be used as the basis for prioritization. It's all about relative value and sequence of implementation. Priority, again, however, is relative. It is not absolute. It can change throughout the life cycle of your project. Basis for prioritization is a key element where, again, we are talking about ensuring that the requirements are prioritized and agreed upon by the stakeholders. Here are some of the bases of some of the elements: time sensitivity, stability, regulatory compliance, risk, cost, penalty, benefit dependencies. And then we have some challenges as well as the need for continual prioritization, meaning that priorities may shift as the context evolves and more information becomes available. Finally, we have guidelines and tools. These are some of the tools that get used as to help prioritize requirements, from business constraints, change strategy, domain knowledge, governance approach, requirements architecture, requirements management tools, repository, and then solution scope. From there, uh, we also use backlog management, business cases, decision analysis, estimation, financial analysis, interviews, item tracking, prioritization, risk analysis and management, and finally workshops. Okay, can you believe that I'm going to have to memorize all this in the next month? I've been working hard on this. And finally, we have the output, which is all around assessing risks. We're going to prioritize the requirements and designs. Notice in this case, now we start to involve the customers and the end users to ensure that we have everything prioritized. We also incorporate your project manager, regulator, and sponsor. Next, we have assessing the requirements changes, which involve evaluating the impact of the proposed changes on scope, schedule, cost, and value. The client kept changing the requirements on a daily basis, so we decided to freeze them until the next release. Very important. Brad agrees, I believe. Assessing requirements changes is all about evaluating the implications of your changes to the requirements and designs. Remember, we've already prioritized them, but now we need to assess them to ensure the implications. And from there, what we're going to do is ensure that they align with the overall strategy, consider if they affect the value delivered, whether there are impacts in terms of time to delivery or the resources required, and whether it alters any risks, opportunities, or constraints associated with the overall initiative. From there, we need to think and remember that assessment happens before approval. Just because your requirements have been maintained, they have been prioritized, and they have been assessed, it does not mean that they have been approved. And that is a common trap in the exam. Finally, in terms of inputs, proposed changes are some of the inputs include proposed changes, requirements, and designs. And then the elements involve the level of formality, whether it's predictive or adaptive. Predictive being, say, waterfall approach, where everything is predetermined and laid out. And adaptive would be agile methodology, where things change on a biweekly basis, for instance. From there, we have some elements, impact analysis as well, where you have benefits, cost, impact, and a schedule and urgency, with impact resolution being the end result. And then you have some guidelines and tools that are in use at this stage, which include governance approach, legal, regulatory information, requirements, architecture, solution scope, etc. With techniques, um, I'm not going to read the whole list. We're adults. We can all read, I hope. So, but from here, my favorites include interface analysis, interviews, risk analysis management, workshops, and business cases. Some of the outputs then, once we have gone through the assessment, include a documentation and around requirements and designs. And then we have our stakeholders, the people who are most critical to ensure that the assessment takes place. Think of it as user acceptance testing at this stage. And finally, we get approval, obtaining agreement that the requirements are complete, correct, and acceptable. As you can see, I've used Agile BA Innovation to design this app in 2 days. It will save the business billions of millions of dollars. Great job. Take it to the approval board. You'll also need approval from corporate governance, information security, global risk management, budget office, legal and compliance, and the Eagle Group. Excellent. So approving requirements is about obtaining agreement, as I mentioned, with whether you can the approval of the requirements and designs may be formal or informal, with predictive being more formal, adaptive being more informal. In the end, it's all about gaining consensus on any new and changed requirements, communicate them, and then tracking and managing the approval process. In this case, something to think about is that the approval itself establishes the baseline for everything that gets done. Nothing starts until you get that approval, correct? So you have your inputs, the verified requirements and designs. You have your elements, which is understanding the roles of your stakeholders, ensuring that you have stakeholder support through consensus among stakeholders. This is where you become a diplomat, gaining consensus, again, ensuring that your stakeholders with approval authority understand and accept the requirements. You can still have an end user who complains, but they won't get what they want simply because they do not have stakeholder approval authority. And then tracking and communicating that approval is very important by recording the approval decisions and ensuring that everything is documented. Here you have the guidelines and tools that are similar to the other ones. Here are some techniques. Item tracking is one that's very important in this case, where we use it to resolve issues identified throughout the agreement process. Acceptance and evaluation criteria is another one, ensuring that the criteria is defined along with stakeholders identified. We have the outputs, which are the final approved requirements and designs, and then your stakeholders. Notice that sponsor is there once again. So in summary, requirement lifecycle management, it describes how we manage and maintain the relationships between the requirements and designs from inception to retirement to ensure that all business information is available for reuse. Now, reuse is a key word here because the business will save tons of money if they're able to reuse those requirements. Every single time you start from scratch, it's an added cost. So anytime we can actually add reusability, it saves money to the business. Again, we go through assessment, approval, consensus, and then managing. And then we have the tasks, tracing, maintaining, prioritizing, assessing, and approving the requirements. Tom and Mary can't approve. Here you have your inputs. Then we have your tasks. We have our outputs. We have the guidelines and tools that we use and the techniques that are involved. This is actually a one-page cheat sheet that I put together for myself that I keep next to my desk, printed, so that I can glance at it whenever I am uh, presenting or talking to others or having conversations for that matter. And finally, in conclusion, I don't always prioritize, but when I do, everything is priority number one. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Jaime.
You're